Good evening, everyone. We are going to start the session. I welcome all of you, and I'm happy that you're here spending this 1 hour with me this evening. And believe me, it will be totally worth it because we are talking to someone really interesting. And I have with me Major General Paul Deepak Naidu. Welcome, Paul, to this evening session.
Thank you, Swati. It's an honor to be here.
So, before I begin, I just want to say something about Curiosity Talks, where we are hosting this event. So, this is a monthly event where experienced and professional WisGen, or people of the wisdom generation, share their wisdom to the curious, to people like you. And it is an offering, among others, from WisdomCircle, the world's leading marketplace that enables retired professionals and organizations across the globe to connect, fostering mutually beneficial partnerships in the field of work, networking, and knowledge sharing. To begin, before I introduce our esteemed speaker for the evening, I read somewhere that there is an inscription at the Kohima War Cemetery from World War II. And it said, "When you go home, tell them of us and say, for your tomorrow, we gave our today." It is an honor to speak with a veteran who has served his country and kept us all safe. Major General Paul Deepak Naidu is an alumnus of St. Joseph's Boys High School, Bangalore. After his pre-university, he joined the National Defense Academy at Khadakwasla, Pune. During his military career spanning 36 years, he has held a number of command and staff appointments at a tactical, operational, and strategic level. The officer is a keen sportsman and has represented the Indian Armed Forces in tennis at the national championships on 2 occasions. He is an avid traveler, photographer, and blogger, and is married with 2 sons. But I don't want to hog the mic, and so I'm going to welcome Paul to tell us more about himself.
Thank you, Swati, for making it sound more impressive than it actually is. There's only one thing I want to add, and that is I was commissioned into the Corps of Engineers in 1986, into the Madras Sappers, actually, which is based right here in Bangalore. And that began my 36-year journey in uniform, in which I was extremely fortunate to be able to do a lot of interesting things, meet some amazing people, and also travel and see some incredible places. So I hung up my boots about a little over 2 years ago, and now I'm a bona fide member of City Street. I'm getting to know Bangalore, spending time with the family, reconnecting with old friends, and making new ones. That's it.
So I read that an unknown soldier has said, "We came as strangers, fought as brothers, and leave as family." So when I saw this picture that you had shared, I thought, let me ask you something about this.
Wow. To be honest, I hadn't heard of this saying, Swati. It's a really nice one. So this picture was taken in the National Defense Academy, I think, if I'm not mistaken, in 1985, just before we passed out. And these are 3 course-mates uh, together. And so the NDA is, as you had mentioned, located in Kadakwasla near Pune. And we go there for a 3-year training stint. It's called the cradle of leadership, and that's exactly what it is, because it takes raw teenage civilians and makes men out of them. And it's one of the few academies in the world where the Army, Navy, and Air Force cadets train together. Uh, it's an amazing place, and to me, it was a life-changing experience, because when I compare myself to what I was when I entered, um, to what I finally passed out, I was more self assured, confident, and I dare say a better person. So, yes, I owe a lot to the National Defense Academy.
But on a lighter note, Paul, the armed forces have a huge number of uniforms. Every event, they're jumping into something else.
Yeah, that's one of the reasons I joined the army, because somebody told me that girls like men in uniform. So,
So did
uh,
that help? By the way, was that useful?
uh, sorry, Swati, this is strictly confidential and on a need to know basis. But the uniform that you're seeing in the photograph is called the Blue Patrol. When we join the NDA, we are allotted, assigned to squadrons. During my time, there were 12 squadrons. And the three of us in the photographs belong to Delta Squadron. We became very good friends in NDA, and we continue to be very good friends even till this date. And just before we passed out, we decided to get a photograph taken of the three of us in all our finery. So we went to this little studio in NDA and got ourselves clicked. And the blue patrols that we are wearing are ceremonial, and we wear it for mess functions and parades, etc. Uh, the bonds that we make in NDA, especially amongst the squadron mates and course mates, they last forever.
So I think connected to what you've just said, I have to ask you, what is the most important thing that you have carried back from your days in the army?
That's an easy one. The Indian Army soldier. I don't think there's any soldier in the world who gives so much and asks for so little in return. And I feel extremely privileged, and to have worked with them and led them both in peace and in operations. And there are several times, during my service life, on numerous occasions, I have been awestruck and even humbled by what the Indian Army soldier can achieve. The performance of our soldiers on the Siachen Glacier and during the Kargil War was testimony to that. And I have, and that has been validated several times during my service life at every rank. So, yes, the Indian Army soldier is somebody special.
That is really heartwarming to hear. I think now we have to come to the important part, which is why everybody is here. Yeah, so I think everybody's waiting to hear about Siachen. You have told me that we have been in Siachen for 41 years, which is really a long time. And we want to hear about it from the person who has served there.
I think before I come to my personal experiences in Siachen, I think it would be only appropriate to give the audience a very brief geographical and historical context of the glacier to make this discussion a little more meaningful. So, the land is so barren and the passes so high that only the best of friends and the fiercest of enemies come by. That's a Ladakhi saying, which kind of beautifully captures the essence and spirit of the Siachen Glacier. So let's first understand the big picture. Where exactly is the Siachen Glacier? So if you look at this map, you will see that the Siachen Glacier is located at the tri-junction between Pakistan, China, and India. And it forms a triangular wedge between Pakistan and China. And by its geographic location itself, you'll get an indication of its strategic importance. So the glacier is located roughly 200 kilometers north of Leh, and to go by road, you have to cross the mighty Kardungla Pass to reach it. It's remote and very inaccessible. And to maintain a large body of troops in operations over there is a logistic challenge, which is like very few parallels in history. So now we have the big picture and we know where the glacier is located. Let's kind of zoom in now to understand more about the glacier. What is its strategic importance and what are the operating conditions of the environment over there? But before I do that, I'd just like to familiarize all of you with a few key terrain features which will figure in our discussion. The first is the line of control, that purple line running from east, correction, from west to east, and going up till NJ 9842, after which it is not demarcated. Then, of course, you have the glacier itself, which terminates at the base camp. This is where the glacier starts flowing and forms the Nubra River. Now, the Rubra River flows from north to south. It's not a very long river, and it joins the Shok River, which itself originates in Tibet, passes through Ladakh, and then finally crosses into Pakistan and joins the Indus. But the feature I really want to talk about is the Saltoro Ridge, which forms the western edge of the Siachen Glacier. Now, the Saltoro Ridge is a 120-kilometer long range. The highest peak on that ridge is 25,500 feet, and there are numerous peaks over 20,000 feet over there. So, by no means is it a small range. There are about 3-4 very important passes on this range through which you can cross over from Pakistan into Siachen, into the glacier. The bottom line is that whoever controls the Saltoro Ridge controls the Siachen Glacier. Just keep that in mind when we talk about the strategic importance. The other feature is if you go due east of the glacier, you will find the Karakoram Pass over there. And to the north of the glacier is the Shaksgam Valley, where, this was illegally ceded by Pakistan to China in 1963. So, with this as a background, let me just very briefly touch upon the strategic importance of the glacier. As I mentioned, it forms a wedge between Pakistan and China, and it denies Pakistan direct access to the Karakoram Pass. Further, whoever controls the Saltoro Ridge dominates the glacier on the east and can look deep into Pakistan on the west. And the Siachen Glacier itself dominates the Shaksgam Valley to the north. But last but not least, the glacier is of vital importance to the defense of the Nubra River and axiomatically of Leh itself. So the Siachen Glacier is an important piece of real estate for India. With this, no, we'll just, before I come to this, Swati, I'll just talk about the operating conditions on the glacier. The glacier itself originates in the Karakoram range at a height of 18,875 feet. And at its base camp, it is about 12,000 feet. It's 75 kilometers long, which makes it the second longest glacier outside the polar region. And its width can vary from 2 to 8 kilometers. The average temperature on the higher reaches is minus 40 degrees centigrade, but it can drop to even 50 and 60 at some times. Snowfall is heavy. It can go up to a depth of 35 feet. Wind speeds can reach 200 kilometers per hour. And this area is prone to blizzards and avalanches. The entire floor of the glacier is riddled with crevices, which can be as deep from 10 feet to bottomless pits. And we have lost a number of men and equipment in these glaciers and through avalanches. The health challenges are numerous, starting from, snow blindness to hypothermia to pulmonary and cerebral edema, frostbite, chilblains, memory loss. The list is long. In fact, just as a matter of information, a soldier can only stay on the glacier for a maximum period of 90 days, because after that, the damages become permanent. So at the end of 3 months, every soldier has to de-induct. To survive on the glacier, you need the best of clothing because of the temperatures and the wind chill factor. You need specialized equipment to move around because of the crevices and the ice walls. You need a very specialized diet, a very protein-rich diet to fuel your body to just survive over there. And most important of all, you need a very special mindset to survive on the glacier and even fight there. The Indian Army has been doing it for the last, 41 years. I would say the Indian Army and the Air Force have been doing it for the last 41 years. And that speaks volumes about this organization. So before we, I just want to wrap up by telling you all very quickly about an operation called Operation Meghdut, which was the operation launched by the Indian Army to seize the glacier. Somewhere in the early 80s, our intelligence agencies got very tangible inputs that the Pakistanis were planning to militarily occupy the Saltoro Ridge. Remember, that is the dominating feature. And they had set themselves a deadline of 17th April 1984. The moment we got wind of this, we launched Operation Meghdut. And columns of men, very small columns of men, which were officer led, were launched to occupy the Saltoro Ridge. And we managed to occupy it by 14th April 1984, just 4 days before the Pakistani deadline. So that when the Pakistanis actually started climbing and trying to reach the heights, they found the Indians were already in occupation. I thought things were pretty basic in 1990s, in the late 1990s, when I was there. I can just imagine what they must have been in 1984 when when there wasn't even proper maps. So this is an amazing story of raw courage, the highest levels of motivation and superhuman endurance displayed by our officers and Jawans. And, I honestly believe that it's a blockbuster movie just waiting to be made. And I just don't know why nobody has done it so far. It's one of the most proactive and effective operations launched by the Indian Army.
You may
Yeah.
get a role in that movie, Paul.
Yeah. At least as an advisor. Okay, so I'm just going to take you all through a few photographs. Now, these photographs have been taken by me, and I'll admit they're not of the best quality, but then in my defense, I had an old automatic Minolta camera, which would only click when it was in a good mood. But so I kind of figured that it would be better to show these photographs of whatever they are worth rather than download something from the net. So the first photograph is about the Nubra Valley, which I spoke about, where the Siachen Glacier melts and forms a river which flows and joins the shore. Now that little black road you see on the side, that is the road leading to base camp. And this was taken on a particularly cloudy and misty day. Next. This is the Shok Valley, okay, and this was taken on a summer's day, and this valley is breathtakingly beautiful in summer, and I think it's become a big tourist hotspot now, but at that time there were no tourists allowed. So this is the river that flows into Pakistan and joins the Indus subsequently. Next. Yeah. So this is the glacier at base camp. Now, base camp is the place where the training of the troops takes place before they climb onto the glacier. This is the place where the logistics support is provided for the troops deployed on the glacier. The terminus of the glacier is called the snout, and it is from here that the Nubra River starts flowing. So this is the famous base camp. Next. When you start walking on the glacier initially, you'll find that there are a lot of rocks. These are the moraines which we learnt about in school. I remember Mr. Luke D'Souza telling us about it. And so there's more rocks and less ice and snow. And it's tough to walk on these rocks. But that's only in the initial part. Next. So this is a camp, an acclimatization camp. When you can't climb up the glacier on one day. To reach even halfway, it takes 4 days of walking, because at the end of every day, you have to stop at these camps to let your body acclimatize to the lack of oxygen in the air. So this was one of those camps. And if you just go back, please, Swati. And if you look to the corner of the photograph, you'll see a helicopter over there. That was a helicopter on a logistics sortie. And next. So as you go higher up, the glacier kind of gets more a combination of ice and snow and rocks. And you can see the two ranges on both sides of the glacier. Right. So as you go higher up the glacier, you get, the snow and the ice increases. And this is at the higher edges. So it's easier to walk technically, but because of the rarefied atmosphere, because of the rarefied atmosphere, it gets very difficult to breathe, and walking even 10 steps becomes effort. So this is my favorite photograph. It was taken from the back of a helicopter, which was returning after a airdropping mission. I had traveled, I was getting de-inducted, so I got a ride back. And this is what the glacier looks like from the air. These guys had airdropped all the rations, supplies, ammunition to all the posts there, and they were coming back. So you can see the glacier stretching out with the peaks on all sides. Right. So with this now, with this as a backdrop, where we have talked about what are the strategic importance of the glacier, as well as what are the operating conditions, I'll come to my personal journey. So I was a young major. I had just finished my staff college at Wellington, which is near Ooty, when I got my posting order. I was expecting to go back to my old regiment, engineer regiment, but I got a shock when I found that I had been posted to a new engineer regiment where I had never served before. So I joined that regiment, and the regiment almost immediately moved to Ladakh. Now, a word about what do the engineers do in the army, the combat engineers. We provide, combat engineering support to the troops engaged in operations, whether it's attack, defense, etc. Engineer regiment, the task of an engineer regiment is basically mine laying, demolitions, construction of bridges, tracks, etc. And to do this, the engineer regiment is divided into three subunits called field companies. So I was made the company commander of one of the field companies, and my field company was assigned or allotted to the Siachen Brigade, which was responsible for operations on the glacier. So when I joined, the Siachen Brigade was very, very active. There was heavy exchange of fire taking place, artillery fire taking place, and small arms fire taking place between the two sides. There were regular skirmishes and even attacks on the posts. So Siachen was a happening place. Incidentally, the firing has stopped since 2003, which is a good thing. So I carried out a quick assessment, and I realized I faced three major challenges. The first challenge was, of course, the operating conditions, the weather, the temperatures, and the altitude, etc. And my troops were all South Indians, because we are Madras sappers, and the boys are affectionately known as Thambis. So I was a little concerned how they would be able to handle the cold. The second challenge were the tasks itself, because the tasks that we had to do had to be executed at heights between 15,000 to 20,000 feet and more. And they were quite different from our normal tasks. For example, we had to construct defenses, we had to erect shelters, we had to make improvised bridges over the crevices, we had to make helipads for the choppers to land on ice pillars. And more important, and the most important of all, we had to do aerial trolley systems. Now, for that, you need to understand that the posts that are there on the glacier are really small. They can maximum take 8 to 10 people in some cases, and they are perched right on top of mountains, which and are accessible only through steep slopes or by crossing ice walls. And these ice walls can range from 500 feet to 1,500 feet. So once the soldiers go up there, they can't come down. So their entire logistics maintenance is done through these aerial trolley systems, which carry the rations, the fuel, as well as their ammunition. So these aerial trolley systems are really important, and it's our job as sappers or engineers to construct these trolley systems, operate and maintain them. And the third, and to me the most important challenge, was I didn't know my command. Being new to the company, I didn't know my boys. And in their defense, they didn't know me either. So, and in a place where every order could be the difference between life and death, there is some degree of trust and confidence that needs to be built up. So I figured that I couldn't do anything about the conditions or the tasks. So I might as well focus. So I decided to focus on knowing my command, and allowing them to get to know me. And within that, I focused on identifying the right man for the right job, because the task being what they are, you had to send the right person to execute them. Let me give you an example. There was one of the most inaccessible and highest posts in the glacier. uh, we had to construct an aerial trolley system there because the earlier one had got swept away by an avalanche. So we sent a detachment of one Havaldar and about 4 or 5 boys to construct the trolley system. Unfortunately, when they reached there, the Havaldar had to be, evacuated because of frostbite, and he lost both his feet due to they had to be amputated. It was that bad. But the result was there was a detachment there without a leader. So I had to find a Havaldar to go and replace him. So I asked around, and one Havaldar volunteered. But everybody told me, don't send him, Saab, because he's a disciplined case. In the last location, he was always on punishments and creating problems. But I interviewed him, and I found something in him, and I trusted my instincts, and I sent him. And you won't believe it. He turned out to be an absolute game changer because the conditions there suited his temperament. He was physically tough. He could take discipline. He could take decisions independently, and more important, he could motivate his team. And you won't believe he got that trolley up and running in 10 days. So that was one lesson I realized, that putting the right man in the right job is invaluable. But to answer your question, Swati, I was very apprehensive when I went to take over command of that field company. But all my fears proved, unfounded, because the boys did an outstanding job, not only just on the glacier, but also in the Kargil war, which broke out, just after that. And, you know, I have no hesitation in saying that if I have become a major general, it is simply because of this field company and the regiment, which I subsequently had the honor to command as a colonel. So, yeah, that's my personal journey in the glacier from a professional point of view.
Wonderful, wonderful, Paul. I'm just wondering, looking at these pictures, do your troops there get training in mountaineering or climbing, or are they just tough guys who just,
No. It's a
you
great
know?
question, Swati. It's a great question. Actually, there is a Siachen battle school at the base camp, and
Okay.
you have to undergo a 3 week, you know, training, glacier warfare training there before you're allowed to go onto the glacier. Because there you learn how to climb an ice wall, how you cross a crevice, and you learn endurance. You taken for long marches to build up your stamina at these altitudes. So no, they are tough guys, no doubt,
Yeah.
but you require specialized training.
Right, right. Uh, Also, being in forward positions, I'm sure that has an effect on families. So, are families allowed in Siachen? Are they allowed to visit you? Can they spend some time with you?
The answer to that is families are allowed, but just for a brief period, for a couple of months during the summer, and they are allowed nowhere near the glacier. And during my time, there were no families. In fact, even women were not allowed at base camp. Um, they could only stay at the Shok Valley, in the Shok Valley. This photograph you see is of my wife and my eldest son. He was about 3.5 years old. We are celebrating my wife's birthday. I'm not at a liberty to disclose which one, but this hut we are staying in, the walls were made of jerrycans, okay, and the inside was just plywoods, and you can see some duct tape. They were put together with duct tape. The roof was tin sheets, and we had a Bukhari, a kerosene Bukhari. You can see the pipe above my wife's head. That's the kerosene Bukhari, which to keep us warm. Very effective, but also very dangerous, because if you don't regulate it properly, it can catch fire and burn the whole place down. There's no water, because the water freezes in the pipes. There's no electricity, so just a few hours through a generator. But yeah, it was good fun. And in fact, this photograph was taken just a few days before the Kargil war started. Immediately after celebrating her birthday, I inducted onto the glacier to meet my boys and familiarize myself with the terrain. And during that period, hostilities broke out between India and Pakistan. In fact, my wife woke up one morning to hear the sound of digging all around. So she opened the door and saw that trenches had been dug in various places in the company location. So she asked my company 2IC, a young captain. She said, "What's going on?" So he said, "Ma'am, war has broken out, and we have received reliable intel that the Pakis are planning some mischief in the Shok Valley. So we have been told to be on stand to and alert. So if you hear any explosion or any gunfire, grab the son and jump into one of those trenches." So to say that my wife was a bit taken aback was an understatement. But then he assured us, "Don't worry, ma'am, we're going to get you evacuated whenever we get a seat on the plane to Chandigarh." That plane never materialized for the next 4 or 5 days. So the two of them ended up sleeping fully clad with shoes and all, just in case they had to jump into the bunker. So yeah, the
Army
army is a
trains,
lot of things, but boring it is not.
yeah, and it also trains wives and children, it seems like it.
Yeah, you get that sometimes better than the officers.
So, we are in 2025 and technology has taken over the whole world. How do technology and nature, because nature is at its fiercest at places like Siachen. So, how does technology and nature, how do they work in tandem?
Actually, they don't. When I joined, there was a totally engrossing confrontation going on between technology and Mother Nature. And being engineers, we were caught right in the middle of it. Um, we had already spent 16 years on the glacier, and the emphasis had, shifted from pure survival to, comfort and sustenance. And the only way to do that is by introducing innovations, gadgets, and in other words, introducing technology. But the spoiler in all this was Mother Nature. And like you correctly said, there is no place, or rather, I would say, very few places in the world where the might and moods of Mother Nature are so amply displayed, as on the glacier. So it, there were three rules of engagement which quickly emerged as far as I was concerned. The first is that any technology you introduce has to be simple, rugged, and easy to use, because the average soldier under those conditions does not want to deal with complicated stuff. Secondly, the technology will not last forever. In fact, its life is greatly reduced. And the third and the most important thing is that it's very easy to start something or introduce a technology, but what is really hard is to maintain it and keep it running. But the good thing is that technology has made an appearance, and since my time, there has been a lot of improvement in the quality of life, as well as the facilities that are now on the glacier. For example, communications. Now you can speak. You have mobile connectivity, and you even have internet. You have drones being used for logistics. The habitats are much better. You have all-terrain vehicles, and most importantly, you have telemedicine facilities. So yeah, technology has made a difference. But from my experience, I can only say that however fancy your technology is, my money would still be on Mother Nature. So whatever technology you introduce, you better have a backup to it, which will rely on the first principles, that is good old manpower and human resources.
To ask this from the standpoint of being an architect myself, have architects made any change in your living conditions in the shelter that is provided for you guys?
Absolutely. The shelters that we got were definitely an improvement on what was there earlier. But I'm told things are much better now. Much more, the layout is better, it is more ergonomic, and the insulation and all sorts of stuff is much better. So, my salute to all architects the world over, especially in India.
No, I guess if we're going to Mars and the moon and we're setting up shelters there, then what is Siachen, right?
I don't know.
So what do you think is the future of tech in warfare? Because now warfare is becoming very different.
Yeah. The impact of technology on the future of warfare is a topic that is being debated, discussed, and dissected in every army all over the world. And in the context of this discussion, I'll just like to make four quick points. The first is the nature and character of war. Now, the nature of war is always going to remain constant. War is always going to be destructive, it's going to be violent, and it's going to be costly. So, but on the other hand, the character of war will always evolve. And it depends on two things. One is on the geopolitical situation, and the other is on technology. So technology, the bottom line is technology is going to have a major impact on the character of war. The second point is, till very recently, we had three domains in which wars are fought: land, air, and sea. In the recent past, three more domains have been added: cyber, space, and the cognitive domain. And technology is going to impact each of these domains in a big way, especially cyber, space, and the cognitive domain. Now, what are these technologies that we are talking about? Just, off the top of my head, I can tell you that artificial intelligence, unmanned systems, robotics, biotechnology, quantum technology, these are some of the, technologies that are going to really impact the future of warfare. And the scary part is that technology, when used especially in cyber space and the cognitive domain, which is your mind essentially, because the cognitive domain is your mind. The impact of technology in these three domains is going to be so profound that it can destroy the war waging capabilities and the critical infrastructure of a country, even without a single bullet being fired. Right? So, how far are we from this? Well, the Ukraine war has shown that we are still some way away, because you still need boots on ground. But I think the next 20 to 25 years will define how technology is going to impact the future of war. I hope that answers your question.
Are we looking at arm-to-arm combat dwindling in the future sometime?
Again, the Ukraine war is an example where we're still using World War One tactics in conjunction with precision guided munitions and drones, etc. So it's going to be a combination of both. But definitely, there's going to be a downsizing in armies, in my opinion. There'll be more emphasis on unmanned weapon systems. We might focus on raising special forces, who can go deep into enemy territory and strike strategic targets.
Right.
That would be my take.
I mean, listening to all these stories and the challenges you face, I think adversity builds a whole bunch of character, not just character, but a whole bunch of it. So, how does the army fashion a leader? Because you need to have leadership qualities to, be there for your troops. So, how does the army do that?
Well, okay, let me give you an example of my commander in Siachen. There are commanders and there are leaders. But when your commander is a leader, then anything is possible. And for a subordinate, you can't ask for anything more. I had one such commander who was looking after the Siachen Brigade when I joined. He was from the Special Forces, short guy, my height, extremely fit, quick tempered, and a real maverick. And he was feared and revered in equal, quantities by the men. But he was a soldier. He would, hop onto a helicopter taking off to a forward post, go there, spend the night with the boys, talk to them, understand their problems, come back the next day. He would push you. He would tell you what he wanted, and he would push you to the limit. And when he was satisfied that you had done your best, he would back away. But the quality I admired most about him was his decisiveness. If you went to him for a decision, he would give it to you on the spot. And for a subordinate, indecisiveness is really, is a torture. So he would not only give a decision on the spot, but he would stand by his decision. And that's something I really learned from him. In addition to that, when the Kargil war broke out, he handled not only the Siachen conflict, but also the Kargil operations in a totally different sector, single-handedly with whatever resources he had. He shifted the troops, recycled them, and you employed them so beautifully that we not only drove back all the intruders, we did not lose a single inch of territory. So yeah, this is one gentleman whom I would love to serve under. As regards my personal, take on leadership qualities, I realize that there are three things that are very important, you know, uh, from my point of view. One is prioritization, because there were so many tasks that we had to do in the glacier and the surrounding areas, and the resources and troops were very limited. There was no way I was going to be able to do even remotely everything. So I had to learn to prioritize, understanding what is important and what is urgent. And the second thing was delegation. Again, I couldn't be everywhere, and there was no need for me to be everywhere. I had almost 30 to 40 detachments scattered all over the glacier, starting from 2 men to 10 men, all carrying out tasks. So you had to trust your men and delegate. And delegating is a very empowering feeling, both for you and for the person whom you're delegating to, and it builds a lot of trust and confidence on both sides. And if you prioritize properly and delegate well, you find that it directly impacts your time management. As a leader, you suddenly realize that you have a lot of time to plan and look at the bigger picture, which is the job of a leader. So yes, prioritization and delegation were two things, and the third thing, which I already talked about, was contingency planning, because the weather, enemy action, illness would put the best of plans, will make them redundant. So you better have not one, but maybe two contingencies to cater for the situation. But I'll just wind up by saying, when I was a youngster, I read a saying. I don't know who it's attributed to, but it's something that affected me and impacted me very deeply. And it went something like this: nobody will remember what you said, nobody will remember what you did, but everybody will remember how you made them feel. you know and I've, to the best of my ability, tried to live by that saying, because I've realized that people want to be acknowledged. They want to be made to feel that they are making a difference, that what they are doing matters. And if you do that and you give them that feeling, then their output, both in terms of efficiency and effectiveness, just improves exponentially. So yeah, so that has been my mantra, Swati, in all my service life.
Fantastic mantra to go by, Paul.
Thank you.
And all that you mentioned about leadership um, brings me to the fact that while you are involved in military engagement and skirmishes and all of that, I'm sure there are some special and memorable moments that you bring back from forward positions or from your time in the army. And I think we would like to hear some of those anecdotes also.
Yeah, the glacier is one place where, if you ask anybody, not just me, anybody who served on the glacier, he'll have a bag full of stories to tell. I like to start off by talking about a person who was not a military person, but who made a huge impact. That made a huge impact on all the troops serving on the glacier. And that's Mr. George Fernandez. He was the defense minister at the time of the Kargil conflict, and he had a great affinity for the troops serving on the glacier. In fact, he's the only minister who has visited every post where a helicopter could go twice. He genuinely cared for the boys. He would speak to them, understand their problems. And do you know, he's actually sent Ministry of Defense officials to visit the glacier because they were delaying the sanctioning of snow scooters. He said, you go and understand the conditions over there, then you'll know why they need snow scooters.
Mm.
And he's the one responsible for setting up of a state of the art hospital in the glacier, which has saved so many lives. And one little known fact about him, is that every Christmas he would send a plane full of chocolates and biscuits for the troops. Yeah, so he was a minister. Yes, minister. He was a guy who actually cared, and we realized that. So
And that must have made such a big difference to the morale of the troops, I can imagine.
Absolutely, absolutely. The next story is about another very interesting one. It is about a soldier called OP Baba. His real name was Om Prakash. So the legend has it that Om Prakash in the late 80s was killed on a post repulsing an attack from the Pakistanis single-handedly. He died on that in that attack, but he safeguarded the post. But it is believed that his spirit still continues to roam around the glacier, and he warns the soldiers who are in the post about imminent attacks. He comes in the dreams of soldiers and tells them that, the enemy is planning an attack, or there is a danger of an avalanche or coming. So OP Baba is revered all over the glacier, so much so they have erected a temple for him and the base camp at the snout of the glacier. And it is a tradition amongst anybody, whether however senior he is, who is climbing the glacier or returning from the glacier to report to the temple of OP Baba and take his permission. So when I climbed up, I had about 10, 15 men. So I marched them all up to this temple, made them stand in attention, walked into the temple, saluted his photograph and said, OP Baba, do I have your permission to climb the glacier? And when I got back, I did the same thing. I said, reported and said, thank you for bringing me back safely. Right. And this is something that nobody would dream. And this tradition continues even now, even now. So it is something that nobody would dream of breaking. Now, some people might be skeptic and say, what is this? But believe me, when you are in there at that place and a point in time under those conditions, all these things make perfect sense.
Yeah, in life and death situations, I think faith goes a long way.
Absolutely. And even if you don't believe it, if your men believe it,
Men believe it, yeah.
if your men believe it, you need to do it. Right. So, yeah, that's the story of OP Baba.
And my
Uh,
favorite story is coming up next, Paul, about dosas.
Yes, yes, yes. So this is to me, this involves me. I was, visiting one of my detachments that was constructing a kerosene pipeline on the glacier in some godforsaken place. Incidentally, kerosene is the only fuel that does not freeze at any temperature. So kerosene is the lifeline for the troops on the glacier. It's used for cooking, warming, everything. So we were laying a kerosene pipeline to pump kerosene to the posts. And my boys, whom you see in the photograph here, were laying that pipeline. And I had gone to visit them. I had started off early in the morning. I'd walked for about 4, 5 hours. It was a bitterly cold day, windy, a lot of snow. So I was completely exhausted. And these guys were staying in, you can see, they were staying inside a parachute. They had made a parachute, their shelter, and they were staying inside that. So when I reached them, they came out and greeted me, and I got a hot cup of tea in my hand, and we went inside and started chatting, and then one of them said, the JCO in charge said, "Saab, shall we have lunch?" So I said, "Kya hai saab khane ke liye?" So he said, "Saab, dosa hai." I said, "Dosa yahan?" And you know what they had done? They had cut the top of a petrol barrel and made a tawa. Through their contacts in the Air Force, they had got fresh batter flown in that morning along with chutney. And I was treated to the best dosa breakfast at 16,000 feet. And to this date, this remains my most memorable meal. Not because the dosas were good, but because of the effort and the care and the concern that these guys had put in, just because they knew that, their officer was going to visit them. And this is what I meant about the Indian Army soldier. If you win his faith and confidence, there is nothing he will not do for you, you know, including laying down his life. So, yeah, that is the best meal I've ever had.
Wonderful, wonderful stories. And I always wonder that, the youth of today, they don't get to hear of all these things. So, how do you think these stories of valor and sacrifice can be, told to this younger lot so that they learn these stories and they learn about our history?
Yeah, it's quite true that the large part of the population has not much idea about the achievements of the Indian Army, their challenges and, even after independence. So I'd like to, there are many ways to do it, but I like to focus on one thing, which is military tourism, which is, actually gaining quite a bit of steam in the recent past. So military tourism offers a perfect opportunity to get to know your armed forces, right? There are battlefields. There are battlefields which you can visit, starting from Rajasthan in the east, or correction, in the west, to all the way to Arunachal in the east. Real life battlefields where you can go there and understand what happened. Then in the hinterland, you have so many memorials and museums and monuments, which I feel is a must visit for the youth and especially for the school children. In fact, under military tourism now, civilians are allowed into base camp to visit base camp. Trekking expeditions and mountaineering expeditions are allowed on the glacier, and I have no problem with that. But provided that there is a caveat where any kind of military tourism needs to be very carefully curated, well regulated, and strict decorum needs to be maintained, because after all, you're visiting sites where our soldiers and officers have laid down their lives, sacrificed their lives for the country, and they deserve your respect, right? So yes, I say yes to military tourism within boundaries.
Having heard all this, I know my answer to my next question, but I'm going to ask you, is the Indian Army the best in the world?
Okay. I'm going to answer that by giving you some statistics. But these statistics are not about the army alone. They are about the Indian armed forces. Because let's be very clear. No war or battle can be won by one single service. It's the army, navy, and air force all working together. So, right. The Indian armed forces are amongst, have been and continue to be among the most operational and combat hardened armed forces in the world. Since independence, we have fought 5 major wars. We have taken part in many operations, starting from Op Meghdut to Op Pavan in Sri Lanka to Op Cactus Lily. We have fought terrorists and counterinsurgency movements. And we have done this on all kinds of terrains, from the deserts of Rajasthan to the icy heights, of the Himalayas, and even the jungles of the Northeast, right? We have contributed to 49 UN peacekeeping missions and given almost 2 lakh troops. And our conduct and, has been impeccable on all these missions. I have been on one in Lebanon, so I speak from experience. So even during natural and man-made disasters, the first responders are the Indian Armed Forces. Some of your best sportsmen who have represented this country are from the armed forces. And I'm not even going down how much you have contributed to nation building in terms of infrastructure or community development. So I kind of rest my case. Does that answer your question?
Oh, it's a resounding yes. It was always a yes even before I asked the question. And I bet everybody here also is going to join me.
Thank you.
So, hearing all about your life story, I just want to know, how have you used your learned skills and your experience to pursue a mindful role in civilian life?
Well, I'm not sure if I'm completely qualified to answer this. After all, I've been a civilian for only 2 years, but I'll take a shot. The first point is, I think all veterans must keep themselves occupied after hanging up their uniform. It could be through, starting a second career or pursuing a hobby, and that's why hobbies are so important. Secondly, veterans have a lot to offer, society in general and industry in particular, because of our background and our, skill sets. But having said that, my advice to a veteran would be to take a job. If you're pursuing a second career, take a job which you enjoy and which is commensurate to your rank. That's the hard truth, because otherwise it will not going to work for either you or for your employer. The other point is that, there are some skills, capabilities, and attitudes which are very relevant and valuable in civil street. like your sense of discipline, your time management, um, your people skills, uh, multitasking. They're all very relevant and valuable, and well appreciated. But there are some other skills and attitudes which are not really relevant and not necessary in Civi Street. So a veteran needs to know what he needs to carry into Civi Street and what he needs to leave behind, you know, when he hangs up his boots. And the most important thing, and the last point, is that the onus of adapting and adjusting to Civi Street, to civilian life, rests with the veteran, because you have left your ecosystem and you're entering a new one where the rules of engagement already exist, and you have to adhere by them. So yeah, this is my little two pennies worth about civilian life, and
I'm going to ask for 2 more pennies worth, because I speak for WisdomCircle, where we are, encouraging people with longevity. We're going to live 20 years more, encouraging people who have stepped out of their main careers and picking up gig work or portfolio work. What would you say to people who are transitioning? Because they are in similar situations like yours. They've left, like you left your army career and you're stepping into new engagement. What advice would you have for them?
my advice would be pretty much what it applies to veteran. You have to keep busy. I mean, nowadays 60 is the new 40, right? I mean, we are all retiring at an age when we are mentally and physically quite active and willing to contribute to society. So we need to keep busy. So I think the same thing which I said to the veterans would apply to anybody transiting from, a particular profession into Civi Street and trying his hand at another profession, Swati. It's not rocket science. It's just about, forgetting who you were to some extent and starting afresh.
Hi, Swati, can I take 1 minute, please?
Yes, Gaurav, you can, please.
Thank you, General Paul. It was a wonderful session. You took me down the memory lane. Actually, I am 67 Lima and ex-NDA of 1985 vintage. I was in Siachen in 1990. So
Good to hear that,
I could not take the benefit of the trolleys which you guys installed in 98. So I missed out on that. So Indian Army has fought at 21,000 feet, actually fought with guns and machine guns. And many continents do not have a peak that high. So it's truly a remarkable feat our soldiers are accomplishing at Siachen. Thank you, General Paul.
Yeah.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone, for being here. I think we could have easily lasted another hour because there are so many comments and questions, but paucity of time. Unfortunately, it's 6 o'clock. I want to say a huge thank you to Major General Paul Deepak Naidu for being here and spending this 1 hour and, giving us such an interesting discussion and such important memories to take home. And I'm sure everybody feels the same. So from all of us here, thank you, Paul.
Thank you, Swati, for this invitation again. And thanks to everybody for listening in. Really, it was entirely my honor and pleasure. Thank you all.